If you already know C++ like me and you want to start coding in Python as soon as possible, I'm going to try to compare C++ language with the Python language, and I'm going to try to do it in less than 15 minutes. Remember that C++ is a compiled language, whereas Python is scripted. So if you want to import code in C++, you will have to use the include preprocessor keyword, and later on you have to, after compiling your program, you have to link it with the appropriate library. In Python, the only thing you have to do is download from the internet the appropriate library and do an import. If you want to create comments in C++, for one line comment, you will have to start with /. For Python, a comment starts if it detects the hash sign character. In C++, you can have several lines of comments. There is nothing exactly the same in Python, but you can use documentation strings that are protected by 3 double quotes. In C++, your program will start at the entry point, which is the main function. There is really not a main function in Python, but you can create an entry point. You can it is best practice to use either this code or this code to have an entry point. Python will figure out where your program starts, but that is not really recommended for large programs. So the best practice is to use these entry points for your program. How to define a block of code in C++? You will use these curly braces, the opening brace and the closing brace, and all the code that exists within those braces is a block of code that can belong to a function. It can belong to an if, but in Python, the block of code is defined by a colon. The colon starts a block of code, and then the indentation defines a block of code. So in Python, the indentation matters. You can also have indentation in C++, but that is only used for readability. Whereas in Python, the indentation defines a block of code. Constants and variables. In C++, you will have to declare variables. You don't have to declare variables in Python. There is no way to declare variables in Python. Constants, if you want to have a constant in C++, you will use the const keyword. Whereas in Python, the only way to know that something is a constant, the best practice is to name it with uppercase characters. A boolean exists in C++. You can also have a classic boolean class in Python, where you can set this variable to true or false. You can have integers and log integers in C++, and there are also an integer class in Python and a long integer class in Python. Python automatically will change your variable into a long integer if your integer grows too much. Regarding floating point operations, in C++ you can define single precision or double precision floating point operations with float and double. Whereas in Python you have the float class that actually works with double precision floating point operations, so it is the equivalent of a double in C++. There is no char class in Python, whereas there is a char variable type in C++, but you can work with chars if you index strings in Python. C++ had a standard template library class, string class. It was not really powerful. It didn't have too many methods, whereas Python has a string class that has a lot of methods to work with. How about string formatting? /t for tab is the same, /n for new line is the same, / double quotes is not the same. You have to enter double quotes protected by single quotes. A single quote in C++ will not translate to Python. You have to protect a single quote in Python using double quotes. And for formatting your strings, in order to combine text with variables, you will have to use in Python the F and double quotes construct. In order to have text with variables, your variables will be protected by braces. You can have casting in Python just as in C++. Control structures, you can have an if, but remember that your block of code begins with a colon and then the indented block of code, whereas in C++ your block of code are protected by braces. You can have if else, also in Python if else. Notice that the else block also starts with a colon and an indented block of code. You can also have a if else construct, but in Python it is known as if elif else. So it is not if else, but it is if elif else. There is not actually a switch control statement in Python. You will have to use some other things such as dictionaries. There is regarding loops, there are whiles in Python that work exactly the same as in C++, and you can have fors in Python, but remember that Python is scripted. For scripting languages, the for works a little different at C++. So, but if you want to have the same thing in Python, you can use this construct. However, the for iteration loop in Python will repeat the block of code, and for each repetition it will be picking up different items from a class container until there are no remaining items in the class container. If you have worked with iterators with the standard template library in C++, this works the same. Something funny in Python is that it includes an else. This will get executed after the for loop finishes. Condition evaluation is the same. Equals to, different to, greater than, lower equals, greater equals. For the negation of a logical variable, you will use the not word. There is something that does not exist in C++, which is the in keyword. This will become true if an item exists within a container. For the AND logical operation, you will use the AND word, and for the OR logical operation, you will use the OR word. For math operations, these are mostly the same as C++: addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and modulus, and the contraction of these operations. But in Python, you cannot use the plus or the minus as you can in C++. You cannot do that in Python. And in order to work with exponentials in Python, you will have to use double stars, whereas in C++ you will use a math function. So how about functions? Remember that there is no overloading in Python. You can overload functions in C++. This means that in C++ you can use the same name for a function as long as these functions have different parameters. You cannot do that in Python. There is no overloading. In order to create a function in Python, you can use the keyword def and then the name of the functions, the parameters, and your code. You can return values with return just as in C++. Remember that the variables that you use in your functions have a local scope just as in C++. Now, talking about arguments, the arguments for calling a function in Python can be positional just as in C++, or can be keyword based. So you can change the order of your parameters in Python as long as you specify which parameter is what. You cannot do that in C++. You can have default values for your parameters. That also works in C++. And there is a note here: beware of container classes. When you pass container classes as parameter, they will pass by reference, not by value. How about container classes? The container classes are the day-to-day tool for Python programmers. Python programmers actually use Python because of their heavy support for container classes. This is these container classes will not map exactly to C++, but just to make an analogy, a list will resemble to a vector, a standard template library in C++. Remember that in Python, in order to initialize a list, you will use square brackets. Remember that it's important, square brackets for lists, and you can have methods for your list that resemble the vector, a standard template library in C++. You can have also dictionaries that map pairs of values. In Python, in order to initialize a dictionary, you will use curly braces. Remember, curly braces for dictionaries, square brackets for list. The thing that resembles most to dictionaries in C++ are maps. You can have methods for your dictionaries that resemble your methods for your maps in C++. If you have worked with pairs in C++, they are mostly the same as tuples. Remember, to initialize a tuple, you will use parentheses, and sets work almost the same. In order to work with exceptions, you will raise an exception in Python, whereas in C++ you will throw an exception. In order to catch them, you can use these constructs in Python: try, except, else, and finally, whereas in C++ you can do try, catch, and catch. There is something really neat in Python, which is the capability to acquire resources and free resources automatically, even if our exception is raised. This is not supported in C++, but in Python you have the with keyword that will let you call a function. This function will acquire resources, and at the same time will call the enter method within a class. So you can also acquire resources in this enter method. You will return a variable that you can work with within this block of code, and when the with block exits or finishes, the exit method is called. So the exit method will free resources. For instance, you can open a file here, and when the block of code ends, the file will get freed. Or you can start a connection here, and when your block of connection your block of code ends here, the connection will get closed automatically. So this is widely used in Python, and you will be seeing it for automation when working with netconf and resconf. So how about classes? Remember that there is no overloading in Python. Constructors cannot be overloaded, so you will have to choose between a default constructor or a parameterized constructor. You have to choose, because you cannot use overloading. Overloading is permitted in C++. Destructors are not called deterministically, because the garbage collection process can call the destructor a lot of time after your object went out of scope. You can create a destructor this way. Notice that you have to include the self object every time you define a method within your class, and this is due that this self object will reference the object that you're working with. In C++, you don't have to do that, because the this pointer gets added automatically by the compiler. You don't see that in the code, but the compiler will do that for you. In Python, you will have to include the self object within each method, so you can create your methods. And in order to have your class be compatible with the with statement, you have to define your enter method and your exit method. That's it.